Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MMQB podcast. It is January 16th, a lovely Thursday afternoon where it's about 10 degrees outside where I am. Hopefully for Gilberto, a little bit warmer out in California. Of course, Gilberto Manzano and I am at Verderame, and we are coming to you on the eve of the divisional round. 8 teams left. Really very intriguing games. A couple that you think you might have an idea of where they're going to go. We'll talk about those. And then, of course, a couple other games that are really tight, and one in Buffalo that could be a classic. We will get to all those and more. But first, Gil, I got to ask you, man, normally kind of just a pleasantry, but how are you doing out in L.A.? Are you good? Is your family good? How are things?
Yeah, my family is doing well. I'm also doing well with my family, But it was a little scary because I grew up in Pasadena. I lived in Altadena for a long time. My mom still lives in Pasadena, and my siblings. I have uncles and cousins and aunts that live close to Altadena to where the wildfires occurred. And, luckily everybody in my family, extended family, they're safe. But, I can't say the same for a lot of people that I know, friends who evacuated very quickly. So, yeah, it was crushing to see that, Matt. I actually used to be a Pizza Hut delivery driver in Altadena, the local Pizza Hut there. So I know the neighborhoods very well, and seeing all the videos and pictures and the TV interviews, man, it crushed me for a few days. I'm still hurting, but to see communities rallying together, people helping each other out, has been great to see. And, I could confidently say that Altadena will rebuild, LA will rebuild. So we're going to move forward and keep being positive, but it was devastating to see last week.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously you're super close to it. Your heart breaks for everybody that you see that had to evacuate their homes, and you hope that they could go back to their homes. And some people tragically can't. Now they've got to rebuild, and it's something that. Look, if you're out there and you're listening or you're watching on YouTube, and you can donate if you're in a position to give a little bit to help a family. Do so. I know, my wife and I have talked about the fact that, we can try to help out. I mean, we don't know anybody personally who's gone through something out there, but one of my wife's best friends lives in San Francisco, and they, despite being way up the coast, I mean, people in San Francisco know people in LA, and everything that's happened. The point being, if you can help out somebody, if you're in a position to do it, try and do it, because this was a massive wildfire. I mean, this was not, look, California, you hear about California wildfires all the time. You're like, oh, okay, this was different. Not that any other one is not serious, but this one was really awful, on that scale. So I'm glad you and your family are well. I'm glad everybody's doing okay. But yeah, it is, obviously, like you said, these communities are tough. They'll rebuild. At the same point, they got a lot of work ahead of them. And, it's not going to happen without a lot of people's help and support.
Yeah, but the beautiful part is that people are helping, and maybe because I'm staying away from the negative stuff, but you always kind of hear people say bad things or turn it into political stuff and this and that. I know people are angry, people want answers, and they want to know why this occurred. But for the most part, man, just seeing everybody get together, obviously because I have family in Pasadena, they're telling me the things that they're seeing, and all the people that are coming from everywhere. And all the donations at the shelters and things like that. And, we've had a couple of friends stay with my mom at my mom's house. So they're telling me they're doing well. So just, people opening their homes, man, that's great to hear. And, they're all going to, move forward. But it's wild, man. When I hear people tell their stories on camera and sharing their stories and how vulnerable they are. But at the end, they always say, we'll be fine. We're alive. Yeah. We're doing well. Today's a rough day, but tomorrow will be better. And that's all you can hope for.
Well, so you know what? I'll share this because I think it's in the spirit of what you mentioned. I think it's a beautiful spirit. Like, there is, out of tragedy, a lot of times, the best of humanity shows up. And you're right. There's always those bad actors, right? There's always those people on social media who are fire marshals from 8,000 miles away. Okay. Yeah. I would have done this. You wouldn't have done crap. But, I remember being a New Yorker, and I grew up an hour and a half outside Manhattan. And I remember when 9/11 happened. I was 13 when that happened. And one of my best friends, who one of my best friends now, I didn't yet know him at the time, I knew him a couple years after the fact. His dad was an NYPD police officer. In the last 6 months of his time being an NYPD officer was being down on cleanup down at 9/11 and the World Trade Center. And there's a church down there that a lot of the police officers, first responders, that they would go in and out of, and they'd sleep on the pews between shifts, and they would go in and get water and have a meal, whatever it was. And I remember, God, it must have been a couple of years after it all had happened. That church basically became, for a long time, like a shrine. And that church had been around since like George Washington had got to church. Right? That church had been there for hundreds of years. And I'll never forget walking in, and all these people had sent, literally in some cases telegrams, postcards, just greeting cards like, hey, from Kenosha, Wisconsin, we're with you. We're thinking about you. I'll never forget. I mean, they plastered the walls of this church with all these kinds of notes. And at the top of the church, where the balcony is up top, there was this huge banner that ran the length of the church. And it was all these kids in Oklahoma who had signed this banner. It was like, Oklahoma's thinking of you. And whenever I saw that, I don't know why, it always got me emotional. It was like all these little kids thinking of these guys. And I remember asking my best friend's dad, who's like a second father to me, I was like, what did that mean to me? It meant everything. We weren't alone. Like, it meant everything, that like people actively showed that they were thinking about us. And so I think there is, as tragic as these things can be, and certainly the wildfires are very tragic, there is a certain amount of, you find togetherness in it. You find an uncommon strength and a bond. And I think that out of that tragedy can be beauty in that regard.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing that you see just little small things like that go a long way. Notes and encouragement and positivity and thinking of you. So, I bet you I'm going to get out there and drive around those neighborhoods that I used to drive around. I was a delivery boy for Pizza Hut. It's going to hurt me, but I'm sure I'm going to see signs everywhere, notes, and people just helping out each other. That's going to be great to see. And, hopefully that time will come soon. But I know right now they're taking care of the city and trying to rebuild it and repair it. So a long way to go. But yeah, little notes like that, man, they do go a long way.
Yes, no question. All right, let's get into football. The wild card weekend was, I guess it's good the NFL dropped super from it, because it was not super. There was one really good game with Washington and Tampa, and the rest of the games were blowouts. Obviously, we know who won. We don't have to sit here and go over these games. We got plenty to get to with the divisional round. Now, just to set the scene for anybody who may not be aware, here's how the schedule plays out. So, on Saturday at 4:30 Eastern, all these times Eastern, the Chiefs are hosting the Texans, followed by the Lions hosting the Commanders at 8 o'clock on Saturday night. And then on Sunday at 3 Eastern, Philadelphia playing a host to the Rams. And then at 6:30, the Ravens are visiting the Bills. And those games on ESPN, Fox, NBC, and CBS, respectively. Look, so let's start here, okay? Here are the odds for the games via DraftKings. The biggest line of the week is actually a tie. The Chiefs are favored by 8.5 over Houston. The Lions are favored by 8.5 over Washington. And then on Sunday, the Eagles are a 6-point favorite. And in somewhat of a surprise, the Ravens are a 1.5 favorite on the road in Buffalo. So, very interesting. The Vegas is expecting that the Commanders game and the Ravens game are going to be really high scoring. The over-under for the Washington game is 55.5. And the Ravens are 51.5. The lowest total, 41.5 for the Chiefs and the Texans. Now, with all that being said, preamble out of the way, Gil, what is just your opening thoughts on the weekend as a whole?
I think it's actually a pretty good slate, and you're right. The wild card weekend wasn't super. There was 5 blowouts, but the one thing I do take away from that, there were 3 upsets. So I did like that part. The Texans beat the Chargers, the Commanders beat the Buccaneers, and the Rams beat the Vikings. So if I get 1 or 2 more upsets in the divisional round, which I could potentially see, I know the spreads are pretty big there. They're massive 8.5 point spreads, a 6 here and there. And obviously the Buffalo-Baltimore game was the closest one there. But, besides maybe Houston and the Chiefs, I could see upsets for the other 3. And even Houston, man, they played their butts off last week against the Chargers where everybody counted them out. But that's a tough ask to go to Arrowhead Stadium and beat the Chiefs. But I could totally see the Rams beating the Eagles. I could even make a case for the Commanders because of the unknown of Jaden Daniels. They never played each other, or Jaden Daniels and the Lions. So maybe there's something there. Maybe I get to a point where okay, you can't punch that high up there with the Lions. But I can make a case for Jaden Daniels being special and winning a close game if the game is pretty tight. and we're all getting ready for potential playoff classic in Baltimore. Sorry, in Buffalo, Baltimore, and the Bills
Right,
there.
right.
And I'm worried about that one maybe being a little bit of a dud because we're getting our hopes up for a classic there. But just the setup of Jackson and Allen, you wrote about it after that matchup was set up. I was hyped for that to take place. So overall, I'm happy with it because for me, as a person who likes to see some upsets here and there, we got it on Wild Card Weekend, and I can make a case for more upsets this week coming up too.
Yeah, no, I think it's well said. So let's also now here, let's dive into it this way. Of these 4 games, let's ask 2 questions at once. Which, if you had to pick an upset, and in terms of upset, like because I know that you have one team that's just favored, that's a lower seed. In terms of the favorites betting wise, which upset would you pick, and which game of the 4 are you most confident in one of the teams winning?
Yeah, for the upset, I'm gonna go with the Los Angeles Rams. I think because they have all the ingredients needed to even get to a Super Bowl. Like Philly and Detroit are definitely 1 and 2, but the Rams just feel like they're right there too because they've done it before. They have the quarterback in Matthew Stafford, who's probably the best quarterback remaining in the NFC right now. You have a head coach who's won the Super Bowl in Sean McVay, and then even putting that aside, like you have good players at the positions that you really need to thrive. Maybe the offensive line's a little shaky every now and then, but when they have their 5 group, their starting 5, they tend to do well. Good running back in Kyrie Williams. You got a star in Puka Nacua. Now that defensive front, that's a game changer. When you have a front like that with a star in the making in Jarrett Verse, 2 stud interior guys and Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk, and you come in waves and bunches. Sam Darnold found out the hard way. 9 sacks for a playoff record. To me, it reminds me a little bit of the Philly 2017 team. Nick Foles won the Super Bowl. He was clutch, but you don't get to that Super Bowl winning without a good defensive front. So sometimes when you have a front that loaded, that stacked, and you could come in 2 or 3 different ways, you could win close games. Now I'll say this: Philly has more depth. They have probably they have experience too. They didn't win the Super Bowl in 2022, but they got there. Good coaching as well. Big fan Joe. We'll see Nick Sirianni if he can pull it off. I worry about that for them a little bit, but they have more pieces, and they got freaking Saquon Barkley. So that worries me a little bit, but everything I listen for the Rams tells me if they're in that game and it's close and it's tight and coaching matters, situational football, and you got Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, they could definitely pull it out. Now, for the for sure win, maybe we're on the same page here. Kansas City Chiefs playing the Houston Texans, but similar to the Rams, I'll give Houston one chance here because they also have pass rushers. When you got Daniel Hunter and Will Anderson Jr., you could do it. It just, to me, we just saw it a couple of weeks ago, and it didn't really matter. When Joe Tooney moved over to left tackle, he's been doing great there. The offensive line just changed. And the Chiefs just went into the playoffs like they're the Chiefs. It wasn't what we saw for, 3 months where, hey, we'll see. I don't know. Boom, here we are. Save the best for last. So I can see Houston Houston pushing it, but I just can't make a case for an upset there.
So, look, we're in the same boat, okay, on both counts. So I'm just gonna talk about something different, but I'm with you on the Rams. The Rams, the big question to me is Barkley rushed for 255 yards the first time they started. Were you at that game?
No, I was not, but
Okay.
it would have been ugly for the Rams, yeah. If I was, I saw that. I saw
I
that in
wasn't sure if
person.
you were there. I know a lot of those prime time games at SoFi. You go. I'll be in Kansas City this weekend for the game, covering it for us. Look, the case I'd make for the Rams is this: if Philadelphia can't run the ball to that extent, and I don't mean to 255, if they can't run the ball really effectively, they have not thrown the ball well at all this season. You'd think they have, right? You look at the weapons and go, yeah, they've thrown the ball. They've thrown the least amount of passes of anybody in football this year.
Wow.
They don't throw the ball. And I wonder, Nakobe Dean being out in this game is a big deal. He's been the heartbeat of their defense. They have had very good corner play. They also have 2 rookies. And going against Nakua and going against Kupp, that is a big challenge in this game. Like, there's a world here where the Rams, if they can get up in the game and turn that front loose, becomes a problem. Now, I think Philly deserves to be favored. I do not think they deserve to be favored by 6 points. I think that line is way too high. I think it's like a 3.5, 4 point line. I get you could sit there and go, well, they played each other before. That was months ago. The world changes. The NFL changes quickly. But I would go this route. The Buffalo-Baltimore game, our picks are out there. I picked Baltimore to win. But I will say this. I do think it's disrespectful to Buffalo that they're an underdog in this game. Now,
Mm.
they were not placed as an underdog initially. They were a 1.5 point favorite in most books, and then the money took it the other direction. Fine. If Zay Flowers does not play in that game, that changes things, because if I'm Buffalo, I'm putting 8 in the box and being like, you want to beat me with Rashad Bateman and Nelson Aguilar? Do it. I don't care. Try and beat me. Here's the problem, and this is why, for anyone out there who might be a fan of one of these two teams listening, this is why I picked that game this way. The Ravens are going to pound the ball. Everyone knows this. The Bills play their nickel defense, and they play a ton of zone, and they don't like to come out of nickel, even if teams are in bigger formation or bigger personnel groupings. And when they played the Ravens in a week, now it was a lifetime ago, I'm not so much worried about the result, but when they played them, they sat in a small front, and the Ravens ran all over them. Henry ran for 199 yards in the game. If McDermott does not come out of that small front that he loves to sit in and loves to play, they're going to give up 1,000,000 yards on the ground. That's my concern for the Bills in this thing. So, look, I think that's a coin flip. The game that I think is just, I'd have a hard time picking the other way, is the Kansas City game. I think Detroit's going to win too, but there is that X factor of Jaden Daniels, where he could turn 6 sacks into him scrambling out 5 times and making a huge play.
Underdog is the best place to cash in on all your takes during the playoffs. Which players are going off and which ones are ice cold. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. With their Pick'em game, you could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on a player's stats, like yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and more. Underdog is the only pick'em platform that puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the Win Now button to cash out whenever you want. Every dog deserves a second chance, and with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose. Now, I am not much of a pick'em expert, but a lot of my friends too, who are novices in this whole thing, say that Underdog is the best way to immediately get into the game. For example, this week, look at, hey, is Brock Bowers going to get higher or lower than 8 catches? Is Joe Mixon going to score more or less than 1 touchdown? These are great ways to get into the game, spice up the action a little bit, and make your weekend of watching football all the more enjoyable. And Underdog is the best place to play Pick'em. Download the app, sign up with promo code MMQB, and deposit now to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's promo code MMQB. You must be 18 years or older, 19 years or older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 years or older in Colorado for some games, 21 years or older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado for some games. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. And in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369.
If Houston had Dell and Diggs, we'd be having a different conversation. I'd still pick Kansas City, but I'd say, okay, that's a game that could be scary. The problem is they're going to put McDuffie on Collins in this game and say, beat us. How are you going to do it? And I don't know what the answer to that question is. Like, when they played a couple weeks ago, Dell had 6 catches for 98 yards and a touchdown in like 2.5 quarters of football, and unfortunately got hurt. And after that, the Texans just could not do anything. And I know the Chiefs enough to know in this game, they're going to put a bunch of guys in the box, they're going to put McDuffie on Collins, and they're going to blitz Stroud like crazy and say, do it, beat us. And I think Houston's defense can hold up somewhat in this game. I don't think they can score. I mean, I think if Kansas City gets to 23, this game's probably done. And I just don't think anybody's holding Mahomes under 23 points in a game that he needs. So I'm with you. I think that's probably the toughest game to make the case the other way.
Yeah, for the Buffalo game, the one thing I'll give them, maybe I guess, something to look forward to. I'm sure they already know this, but having linebackers healthy and Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard out there, maybe that can make a difference. Maybe Sean McDermott has a game plan that, okay, you didn't see this before. All right, let's try to do it. But the problem is we've seen a lot of teams try to stop Derrick Henry, and they can't do it. And then you throw in the Lamar Jackson element there too. And yeah, he doesn't have his star wide receiver. We'll see if he doesn't play, if he plays or not. But it's just difficult, even if it's just a two-man game with those two guys that run on the option, and you know they wear on you. So it's hard for me to make a case for them to stop that. But you do have two of your best players there. I think there were some other guys that were hurt in that game too. So I don't want to take that away from them. Maybe they're better with those guys. And then the Houston game, I was very impressed with the two-man game with C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins. Like, I don't want to take anything away from Ladd McConkey. He's a great rookie wide receiver, but he doesn't do what Nico Collins does down the field. Large catch radius, contested catches, winning those 50-50 balls. And maybe that's their only hope there. But the problem in that wildcard game that, C.J. Stroud was able to overcome a very good defense is Justin Herbert has a similar problem. He doesn't have a lot of weapons either. Patrick Mahomes has weapons. They're not star number one wide receivers, but they're pretty good. And last time we saw them, Hollywood Brown, I thought made a difference. I think Xavier Worthy is getting a little more open now. There's more connection now with Mahomes and Worthy. DeAndre Hopkins is doing well. Juju Smith-Schuster has been in these moments too. So that four, just to me, tells me you have depth and you have guys you could count on, but they're not number ones. I get it. And then you throw in the whole Joe Tooney factor with the offensive line. It's just too much for me to make a case for Houston with the thin roster for the Chargers. And you were at home too. I see why they came back and they were battling, and C.J. Stroud had a great game.
Yep.
But they do have some good pieces there. Nico Collins is a stud, and you got some good defensive players. And Derek Stingley Jr. can help you out too. Maybe get a pick here or two. So maybe we're overlooked a little bit. It's just hard for me to even get to that point.
It's not so much. I feel like I've thought about this game quite a bit. I don't think I'm overlooking Houston in the sense that I respect them. Like they deserve to be who they are. I just think when you get to the playoffs, I've always felt you've got to have a lot of ways to win. Like if you're going to be a champion, if you're going to be a team that can get to the Super Bowl and Super Bowl, that was always my problem with Baltimore for years. It was like, yes, I know you can run the hell out of the ball, but can you throw it? Now this year, that's changed. They can throw the ball. But that's why I also said that thing about Flowers. Like if he's not there, that's great. You can run the ball like crazy. You know what else Buffalo can do? Put 8 guys in the box every play. Like that's the problem I have with Houston in this game. I have seen the big argument I've seen, and I understand it, is like, well, look at their edge rush. You don't think the Chiefs are factoring in that they've got an edge rush? Like, the Chiefs are going to go into this game, and their number one offensive priority is they are not going to beat us. And however they go about that, they're gonna minimize those guys. They're gonna do it. Like, that's the problem. That's why the Chiefs, look, people have looked at Mahomes, and rightfully so. Like, he's an incredible player, and it's like, well, he's the main reason to have this dynasty. And sure, he is. He's the main reason. Look at why they won the Super Bowl last year. They won the Super Bowl because of their defense. They win games a lot of different ways. They can win games pounding the ball with Hunt and Pacheco. They can win the games throwing the ball 40 times with Mahomes. They can win the game because their kicker goes out and has 3 50-yard field goals. They can win the game because they have 6 sacks because they have Chris Jones and Karlaftis and Amenu. Or they can go out and just cover you. And there's not much you can do. Like, they win a lot of different ways. And by the way, I think that's true of Buffalo this year, where like James Cook can really pound the ball, and they have a lot of different guys you can throw to. They're kind of built the same way Kansas City is in terms of not one great weapon, but a bunch of guys they can beat you with. That's the problem I have in this game with Houston. It's like, yes, Nico Collins is great. They have no one else to throw the ball to. Those edge rushers are great. But like if those guys don't wreck the game, I don't know how you stop Mahomes over and over and over and over. Like, that's the problem. And it's the same problem I run into with Washington. Like, I love McLaurin, but Dynamic Brown is not scaring the hell out of me. Like, I think, defensively, look, their front is good. Fowler's played really well. And they've got, I think Armstrong's an underrated player, and Bobby Wagner's a stud, and all the rest of it, Luvu's a stud. That secondary really scares me. And, it's just, Detroit can win a lot of different ways. Kansas City can win a lot of different ways. I don't know that the teams that they're playing can win a lot of different ways. That's the issue I run into.
Yeah, with C.J. Stroud, I liked what he did last week. He was able to move around a little bit, some good pocket awareness, and you could tell he's not used to running a lot because he was sliding with his knees, and I'm like, what are you doing, man? So, like, we'll go with the feet first, man. Right. But he was making the plays, and I remember that 3rd and 16 to Xavier Hutchinson. I'm like, who was that? And he's getting the first down for 34 yards. So it's just going to be harder And at least with Jaden Daniels, you know that he's able to, break one free, and you have that threat in your mind, like, oh, should I leave my man to go get that guy, that quarterback? I don't know what to do here with C.J. Stroud. We'll see if the Chiefs give him that respect there. But you're right. Even with the Commanders and the Texans, there's some good pieces. It's just there's not enough depth to hang with the Lions and the Chiefs of the world. And obviously, I'm sure Mahomes wants a Nico Collins, but when you have four wide receivers that are reliable, and Travis Kelce's still there, and even Noah Gray is a good pass catcher, so there's depth on depth there. So yeah, I want to see something from Houston. I want to see a good fight. And it says a lot that C.J. Stroud is in year 2, and he already has 2 playoff wins. He's 2-1. I'm not going to count them out. He has some good pieces where you want them. It's just the depth there is really lacking. You're right. If Tank Dell was there, Stephon Diggs, we might have a ball game here. So we'll see what happens, what plays out. That's why you play these games here. And again, I was happy that three upsets occurred. Maybe a couple more could happen this Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, so let's get into. We talked Texans Chiefs. Let's talk quickly before we go to the Sunday game. Let's talk a little bit about Washington and Detroit. We both agree that if Washington's going to keep it close and/or pull off a big upset, it's going to be because Jaden Daniels is the X factor here, right? Like his legs are the X factor. He's obviously been awesome this year. He would have my vote as Offensive Rookie of the Year. Do you worry at all about the Lions in this game with their defense? Or do you feel like they've gotten on track based on the Minnesota game and you feel good about where they are?
I do worry about it a little bit. And, let's say with Jaden Daniels, maybe he's able to run around a little bit. He's getting converting third downs and you're getting points on them. And I'm not saying the Commanders are going to score points like they did, like the Buffalo Bills did in Detroit in that game where, okay, you can't get a stop here. I don't see that. But what if they're extending drives? What if this defense is getting gas in the fourth quarter and this game is actually pretty tight and close and it's like, okay, you've been dealing with Jaden Daniels all day. Terry McLaurin is giving you problems because, and to the credit of the secondary, they've done well. I think Terrion Arnold has done a little better from a rocky start. I think he's going to be available for that game too. So there were some injuries there too. Alex Anzalone coming back in Week 18 was great. So maybe this is a better defense now, and they could do enough there. But you don't have Aiden Hutchinson. You don't have a Leo McNeil. What if you're not able to get to Jaden Daniels? What if he was scrambling around and being a good creator, making changes at the line of scrimmage? So to me, if you're getting gas and you're getting tired and you're being frustrated and you're making mistakes because you're playing this guessing game and what is he going to do, throw or run, that could be a problem. It's just but on the flip side, it's complementary football. What if Jared Goff is scoring a bunch of points on a so-so defense? And
right.
Lattimore had a lot of trouble with Mike Evans last week, and I think it got to the point where they said, okay, that's enough. Go follow the other guy and have double coverage here on Mike Evans. So if you can't hang and you're playing a shootout, I don't think Jaden Daniels has enough for that too. And then your defense is getting beat up. So maybe a lot of hinges on Jared Goff and what he does with Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So if it's not a shootout and this game is pretty close and we've seen what Washington could do in the fourth quarter and come back, I give them a huge advantage right there. But it's just that's asking for a lot for a defense to stop them too.
It is. But I will say this to Washington's credit. They've got a lot of wins this year against pretty good teams. A lot of these teams in the playoffs, that's one of the other things. I look at Houston, I felt the same way about the Chargers and the Broncos. It's you're beating nobody all year long. Houston beat Buffalo, and that's it. The Chargers beat Denver twice, and that's it. But Washington, that's not the case. So you look at Washington, they beat the Bengals 38-33 in a game that was a shootout, and Daniels went crazy in that game. They didn't beat Baltimore, but they only lost 30-23, and Daniels played great that game. That was in Baltimore. That was a big showdown in October. They lost by a point to Pittsburgh. They lost by 1 touchdown to Philly. They also beat Philly. Now, that was also a weird game. On one hand, you're like, yeah, well, Kenny Pickett played some of that game. On the other hand, the Commanders had 5 turnovers and won the game. They beat Atlanta in a big game late. So, and then, of course, they beat Tampa on the road in the playoffs. So, they've won games this year where you're like, it's a pretty good win. Maybe not beating Detroit, to be fair, but quality wins. They have played well. There's not any game this year where they were just blown out of the game against a good team, except for week 1 against Tampa, right? And, of course, that's the first start of Daniels' career. So, I do find it interesting that you'll look at Washington and you're like, you know what? They're not going to be overly intimidated by the moment. The other thing I think that helps them, it's inside. It's a dome. Houston, that game's going to be 11 degrees. Does that matter? You have some of those guys getting off the bus going, "Oh my God, like get us inside now." You know, you're not going to have that with Washington. It's like, hey, cool, going to go play in 70 degrees. Perfect, awesome. I think Detroit's going to win, but I also think that there is a world we're sitting here in the middle of the third quarter going, man, you know, Daniels is just giving them all kinds of problems, and they can't get him on the ground, and McLaurin's making plays. You know, the Lions don't have a McDuffie. You just go, well, they're going to put him on McLaurin. They don't have that guy. So I am interested to see how this game goes.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see how Jaden Daniels makes it work. Obviously, you got Scary Terry McLaurin there, but to see Zach Ertz, you know, come out of nowhere. When did he join Washington? Or Jamison Crowder getting a game-winning touchdown, or even Noah Brown back in the Hail Mary. Like, just the way he's making it work. Austin Eckler gave him a little spark last week too. Brian Robinson runs hard, so yeah, they're not, you know, I guess the most talented group of skill players, but the whole Jaden Daniels factor, man, just having that poise. And I remember, I think it was like a big time fourth down in that Tampa Bay game, and he's over there laughing with the defenders on Tampa Bay before timeout. I'm like, what the hell? This guy's a rookie. And then I think maybe they got the touchdown after that. So it just tells you a lot about that guy.
Sometimes, you know, this is where legends are born, right? I mean, you know, now look, CJ Stroud, I know he struggled a little bit this year. He's a great player, okay? And last year he went into the playoffs and he was kind of like, yeah, man, all right, here, watch this. Boom. Now look, now to be fair, then they went on the road to Baltimore the next week, and it was a lesson learned, okay?
Yeah.
Fine. Now, Burrow was not a rookie when this happened. He was in his second year, although he'd only played like 20 games. They went into Arrowhead in the AFC title game, and it was like they have no shot at winning this game. They got that 21-3, and I mean, look, I'll be the first one to admit, I'm sitting there like, okay, this is done, right? Like, this game's over. It was not over. They came back. They won in overtime. And look, Joe Burrow, and I'm not saying like incorrectly, but like he's kind of been living off that for years. Like that win plus going and beating Buffalo. And look, he's a great player. But the point is, that was kind of the birth of Joe Burrow as Joe Burrow, right? At least in the NFL. If Jaden Daniels goes to Detroit and wins this game, you're like, damn, man, all right. Like, okay, you know, you're here, man. You're here. Like, and I'll tell you right now, if he does that, Philadelphia or the Rams are taking him pretty damn seriously the next round, right? So it's an opportunity. I'll say this for Washington and for Houston. There's one thing about both of them that is dangerous this weekend. They have nothing to lose. Nobody is expecting them to win these games. Washington a little more of that, only because they weren't even expected to be in the playoffs. For Houston, like going in, there were actually real expectations. Like, nobody's picking the Texans to win this weekend. Like, they could go in, they could run a fake punt. They could go on 4th and 8. You know, they could, hey, the Chiefs and the Lions can't totally play, although God knows with Campbell, the Lions will do it anyway. But, like, there's a little bit more of like, hey, you're expected to win this game. There's no pressure on those two teams. All right, let's get to the Sunday slate. Let's start Eagles-Rams. We'll get to the quote-unquote best game last. We both think the Rams are a real live dog here. Do you think they can curtail Barkley in this game? And I don't mean hold him to 70 yards, but like, can they hold him to 100? I mean, can they hold him to 22 carries for 105 and a score, let's say? Or do you think it's another one of these games where Barkley runs amok?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer, and it's a little bit like we were talking about for the Commanders. You know, maybe if your offense for the Rams is getting points and they have another 10-point lead like they did against Minnesota, and you're feeling good, and the game changes for the opponent when it comes to the game script. Like Sam Darnold had to throw the football, and that wasn't good. They went away from the run.
Right.
So if you're able to abandon it a little bit, you're not going to abandon Saquon Barkley. That'd be a massive mistake if you're doing that. Kellen Moore maybe don't get hired in Dallas. Nick Sirianni, what are you doing here? So you got to feed that guy regardless of what happens there. But if you're forcing Jalen Hurts to throw the ball a little more too, and be a little more aggressive and feel the pressure, then he's going to feel the pressure on the other side with the defensive front. So to me, that's the only way I could see it happening. But I can't forget about that 255 game in L.A. because they couldn't set the edge. Even a great player like Jared Verse, who was great at rushing the passer, it was a learning lesson. They got humble a little bit. You got to go set the edge. You got to be physical, stop the run, and that's the problem. Like the problem with Barkley is like he does everything so well between the tackles, outside, can even catch the football from the backfield, and it's just so much for a young defense to figure out their assignment. They play well, a good chemistry, they're in sync. And maybe this sounds weird to say it, but with Derrick Henry, you know what's going to happen. It's going to be power football, try to stop it.
Downhill.
Yeah, easier said than done. So with Barkley, there's more to think about, and I think that's why they got a little bit exposed. They're like, oh man, damn, how do you do that? And they even stacked the boxes a couple of times for the 70-yard touchdown that they had, and nothing happened. So I don't know if they're gonna find that formula. I know Sean McVay has talked about it and said we're gonna try a lot of things differently, obviously, and try to figure out. But to me, I just go back to have Stafford jump out to a lead, and the problem though with them that worries me about the Rams, where I got a little critical of them and said I don't really care about them because they have these long stretches where they can't score points. Their first quarter numbers are pretty bad. They can't really score. Like what happened against Minnesota, an opening drive touchdown, that's rare for them this season. They don't really do that. So if you're able to do that against a very good Vic Fangio defense, which is tough, to do. Jaden Daniels has some success against Vic Fangio's secondary. I could definitely see Matthew Stafford having a little more success because he's Matthew Stafford and you have Puka Nacua and you have a pretty balanced attack. So to me, it's all about your offense. You can't have a slow start. And to the credit of the defense, they bailed out this offense so many times. They're the reason why they won the NFC West title. There was like 3 games in a row where they held an opponent to under 10 points and obviously under 10 points against Minnesota. So they were capable of carrying a team, but you can't have that. It better be both sides contributing in this game here.
Yeah, no, I think it's well said. Look, you're right. Like, when you face Derrick Henry, you're not as worried about, like, setting the edge. Like, he's probably not running a sweep. Where with Barkley, like, if you don't set the edge right and he gets what, you got a problem. He's a lot, honestly, look, he's a lot like Christian McCaffrey. In that sense of McCaffrey can run inside. He can run outside. You can throw him the ball. It's just a lot of times you better have multiple guys there to tackle him because you're not going to tackle him one-on-one. And good luck getting him to the ground, right? Like Barkley's been a beast this year. He's been the best offensive player in the league. I'm sure he's going to win Offensive Player of the Year, and he should. I think if you're the Rams, if you're going to go in there and pull the upset, and you touched on this, I think if you're McVay, you go into this game, you're like, look, we're going to be super aggressive offensively. I'll tell you right now, man, their first drive of the game, they're at 4th and 6 at midfield. I'm going. I don't care. I got to get ahead of them. Because to me, if you can get ahead of Philadelphia, you can get them how you want them to play and throw the ball a little bit. Now, granted, look, it's not like they're throwing to bums, but you'd rather them doing that than hand off to Saquon Barkley. You'd rather make Jalen Hurts beat you, right, than sit there and if he does, hey, fine. But, like, better that than 30 sledgehammers into the head with Barkley. It's kind of like playing Baltimore over the years. Where, look, you got all the respect in the world for Lamar, but, like, you'd rather him drop back than throw the football. I remember last year in the AFC title game, of course, they got a lot of flack for it. But, like, if you go back and watch that game, the Chiefs did something I have never seen a team do before in a football game. Almost every play, they spied him with 2 guys. They just were not going to let him run the ball. They're like, you're not running. You're not. They didn't even try to pass rush him. They just stood there and were like, that's fine, throw it. And he threw for a decent amount of yards, but he couldn't. They couldn't run. They couldn't do anything on the ground. It took them out of their game. And I wonder in this game for the Rams, offensively, you got to be aggressive. Defensively, do you just challenge Hurts to make the throws and just say, you know what, we're putting 8 guys in the box. I don't care. You want to throw the ball deep down the field, challenge it. The hard thing is this time of year too. Look, it's colder. It's harder to grip the ball. You're not gonna have as good of a feel for it. Ball's a little bit harder, a little slicker. If I'm the Rams, I might take my chances on that and say, you know what? If you beat me with 3 deep balls, and hey, you win. You win. You deserve to win the game. I'm not dying by death of 1,000 paper cuts. I'm not. If you're going to beat me, it's going to be you just chucking it over my head. It's going to be your defense getting big stops on 3rd and 4th down. I can live with that if I'm Sean McVay. I'm not going to live with it punting on 4th and 3, and playing an even box. Playing 6 in the box because I'm trying to stop Dallas Goedert. I think you have to be aggressive in those regards.
Yeah, and the problem is, like you mentioned, these guys are not bums, and I do worry about LA's secondary in terms of coverage. They're actually pretty good ball hogs, and they know how to help out their front there. And to Chris Shula's credit, he turned out the heat a little bit the second he saw Sam Darnold overthinking and not knowing what to do. Here's a safety blitz, it's a corner blitz. Let's go rush this guy with extra pass rushers. They don't have to do that too often because they have great defensive ends and interior help there. But I've seen the secondary struggle. They can't really cover for a long time, and that element with Jalen Hurts able to extend plays, it could hurt them. And to Hurts' credit, he was stuck on 39 passing yards for most of that game. And then he took over, hey, Devontae Smith to the left a little bit, Dallas Goedert, go do your thing. Here's a stiff arm for you, Packers defense. So that also could hurt them. And obviously, you got AJ Brown, and I think he's dealing with an injury. We'll see how he's doing, but you can't have one catch for 10 yards. So the secondary does worry him in terms of coverage. They're pretty good. They know how to play within the scheme. They complement each other pretty well. But that first half of the season, it got ugly. I still remember that Jameson Williams game in week 1. Jawan Jennings going off on them. So you can do that. And AJ Brown had a great game in LA too, by the way. So it's easier said than done. But it's like pick your poison, man, like you mentioned. And I guess I'd rather have Jalen Hurts trying to figure it out.
Yeah. No, I think for sure. That's not even a knock on him. It's just Barkley's that great, right? It's kind of like, again, with the Niners last year. You'd rather Purdy throwing it. And Purdy was great last season, and he's got a million weapons, but you're like, hey, man, anything's better than Christian McCaffrey downhill 25 times a game. All right, let's get to the last game of the weekend, which I think we all think is the best game of the weekend. The Bills were initially favored by 1.5. That has now swung, depending on the book, to point and a half for the Ravens. These teams, I don't know how much you take out of this. They saw each other in the 2020 playoffs. The Bills won 17-3. It was 10-3 for a lot of the game, and then Lamar threw an 100-yard pick six to Taron Johnson. That ended the game. These two teams saw each other in week 4. The Ravens won 35-10. It was the Bills' first loss of the year. Henry ran 24 times for $199 and a touchdown, an 86-yard touchdown, the first play from scrimmage. These teams now get together. As you mentioned, Bills, a little bit different. Matt Milano's playing in this game. Amari Cooper is not yet on the Bills. He is, of course, now on the Bills, although he has not had a huge impact, but he's there. The Ravens, it remains to be seen, but the expectation is they might be without Zay Flowers this weekend, which obviously would be huge. But the offensive line's in a better spot than it was earlier in the year. They had a lot of moving parts. They've settled that down. The defense is way better than it was earlier in the year. Early in the year, the Ravens were one of the worst defenses in football. They've been one of the best over the last 2 months. However, that schedule has included the Steelers 3 times and the Browns and the Giants and all these teams. You're like, when you look at the game, other than the stuff we've talked about, the obvious of, hey, can Henry just take off and run for 200 yards? Like, what do the Bills have to do in this game to get out of here with a win at home?
I think going off what we just said, is this defense actually that good, or they just benefited from a so-so schedule with so-so quarterbacks, and you're not going to have that luxury against Josh Allen and all the weapons that he has. And like you mentioned, they're similarly built like the Kansas City Chiefs, where you don't have an alpha wide receiver, but you have some reliable ones that could help you out. You have a very good running back in James Cook, a good offensive line too as well. So, but the problem is, like we're all talking about Lamar Jackson. Josh Allen is also a problem. Dual threat, mobile. He's a different kind of runner. He's a power runner. He's going to beat you in the red zone at the goal line. So, can Baltimore do that? Can you handle that? And honestly, if it goes into a shootout, Matt, I favor Buffalo. They have more weapons. That I think they have a better passer. That's no knock on Lamar Jackson, but I've seen what this guy could do. And Joe Burrow had that level pretty high for passing, but Josh Allen was right there too. And I know Joe Burrow's not going to get the MVP because he didn't make the playoffs, but it's hard to get to that elite level of passing. I think Josh Allen got there for a big stretch, and that's why he moved up your quarterback rankings. That's why people were talking about him as the MVP. So, it's weird to say that he got better without Stephon Diggs, but when he's able to move the ball around a little more, you don't know where that thing is going, and he's able to be a general leader like that. And here's the ball for you. Here you go. Boom, boom, boom. That's a problem to deal with. But the problem with Baltimore, they have some great players. It was just strange that they couldn't get on the same page. Maybe because Zach Orr was taking over, and to Zach Orr's credit, he turned that thing around. And for the entire season, they were number one against the run too. So maybe that helps them out. But we keep focusing on Derrick Henry and how they're going to stop him. But how about the Ravens? How are you going to stop Josh Allen? How are you going to stop this very dangerous offense that lit up Detroit for 40 points, went into SoFi Stadium, also had another 40 points? Like, they're a juggernaut offensively. Yeah, you don't worry about the wide receivers because there's no, Nico Collins or Terry McLaurin, but they're pretty damn good. So to me, what do you do if you're in a shootout? Can you keep up? And then also, Jackson, if you don't have Zay Flowers, can you keep up with the passing too?
Look, and I think Zay Flowers, if he's not there, like I picked Baltimore before that. If he's not there, that to me becomes a complete coin flip if it wasn't already. So if I'm Baltimore, to play off what you just said, if I'm Zach Orr, I'm going to this game going, all right, look, we've got 3 good pass rushers. We've got Odafe Oweh, we've got Kyle Van Noy, and we've got Matabike inside. Okay, I'm not blitzing in this game. I'm not. Like my guys up front have to get home. And I will say right now, it's going to be a challenge. The Bills have a very good offensive line. But that is, to me, the game within the game here. They've got to get home without blitzing like crazy. And for Baltimore, you say, well, is that something that they can do? They have those three guys. Can they get home? Look, this season, when you look at the Ravens, they're not a blitz-heavy team. They rank 26th in blitz percentage. By the way, who's 27th? The Bills. So don't expect a lot of blitzing in this game. But if I'm Baltimore, I'm saying I'm rushing 4. And I've got Nate Wiggins, who was their first-round pick out of Clemson, who's played very well this year at corner, and you got Marlon Humphrey on the other side. I feel like I can man up with those receivers, and I can. Now the Ravens have been zone heavy at times. I'm playing a lot of man in this game. I'm playing a lot of man. I'd play zone with the linebackers to keep eyes on Allen, and to keep eyes on those backs slipping out of the backfield. Because they love to throw to Cook. They love to throw to Ty Johnson. He's excellent. He's an underrated player. If I'm Baltimore, with the corners, I'm manning up. I am taking Shakir as much as possible out of the game. I am taking, pick your guy, Cooper or Coleman, out of the game. And my thought process is I'm using Kyle Hamilton as a do-it-all Derwin James type in this thing. I'm moving him all over the field. I'm blitzing with him on occasion. I'm going to lock down Kincaid with him on occasion. Right? Like, I'm going to use him as an extra run fit in the run game. He is the ultimate queen on the chessboard defensively. He is the Troy Polamalu, the Eric Berry of that type of a guy. So that's how I'd play it. Now, the flip side of that is if I'm Buffalo, I'm coming out and saying, I'm going to try to run the ball. Now, maybe they can't. As you mentioned, Baltimore's been excellent against the run this year. But I'm trying to run the ball. I'm seeing how you're going to play it. Now, if I can't run the ball, I'm going to try to get Allen, some moving pockets, get him moving around, not because they can't protect, but because he is dangerous as hell, and he can put you into conflict as a defender. And I want the play to break down a little bit. I want that if I'm Buffalo. So that's going to be an interesting part. Then the other side of this thing, when the Bills are on defense, look, we all know they got to stop Henry. Like, everybody in the world knows, and Buffalo knows that, and that speaks to my point earlier about the Houston-Kansas City game. You got to be able to win more than one way. I would imagine Buffalo is going to go into this game big. Look, whatever we've got to do. If McDermott doesn't come out of nickel in this game, he's out of his mind. The question becomes, then can you throw to the tight ends? Can Bateman have a good game? Because if that can't happen, I don't care if Henry rushes for $130. You're not going to win. Like, you're going to have to do some things beyond that. The difference with Baltimore this year is I think they can throw the ball. And look, Buffalo's been terrible defensively for 2 months. I don't care that they held Denver to 7 points. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Like, when they have played good offenses, they have gotten shredded to death in these games. That is the concern that I have. Is just can they get off the field? They haven't been able to. So they're 28th on third down. It's been a problem.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that Denver game. It was 31-7, but I was watching that first half thinking, like, okay, they got an opening drive touchdown. They got inside Buffalo territory 3 out of the first 4 drives.
The game was there to be interesting.
Yeah, I'm like, I feel like Baltimore would have got at least a couple touchdowns and maybe another field goal or 3 touchdowns, and then it's going to be a close game in the second half. So to me, that slow start can't happen against the Ravens. And
that's been a problem with Buffalo this year. They've had a lot of games like that, where they've started out like slow for a quarter, slow for half. They start out slow for a quarter, slow for half in this game. They're going to be done. And by the way, I think it's a great point. Like, everybody looks at that game now and they're like, oh, it was a blowout. And like, it ended up being a blowout. Ty Johnson made a great catch in the end zone to make it 21-7. That was on 4th down. Like, if he doesn't make that catch, which, look, I got to be honest, I think the world of Ty Johnson. Like, that's probably a catch he's making 1 out of every 3 or 4 attempts. That game was 13-7 late in the third quarter, and Denver's the ball. I mean, that game, there were a lot of times where Nick's had all day to throw, and he'd throw it in the dirt, or the guy, Sutton dropped the big pass in the game. Like, it's kind of like that Texans-Chargers game. Everybody now has this, like, hindsight of that game. The game was an atrocity.
Oh, yeah.
The game was a terrible, like, all these people now, Texas played great in that game. So, did you watch that game? Because I got to tell you, that wasn't the takeaway I was watching in real time. Like, everybody on my feed for the first 3 quarters of that game was like, this is terrible. I can't believe we have to watch this. So, look, I think Buffalo is better than it looked at times down the stretch. I also think that the Ravens, if they play their best, I just think they're better. And I think that might show up. All right, let's make our picks here just right around the horn. Who are your 4 picks for the games?
Yeah, the first one, obviously, I'm going with the Kansas City Chiefs there. The second one, I think Commanders could be close. I'll even take the points here for them, but I'll go Detroit to win. And then my one upset, I'm going to take the Rams. I don't feel good about it, but like I mentioned, they have the pieces to even get to the Super Bowl, and I feel good about that, the experience and having a good front and Matthew Stafford on their side. And then for the nightcap here, I will take Baltimore. I just can't get over the whole Derrick Henry factor, 199 in week 4. You do have your linebackers back for Buffalo, but like you mentioned, they like to play small. They're not the best, defense. So, I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout like it happened in week 4, but I think Baltimore and Derrick Henry would be a little too much for Buffalo.
So we have the same picks, except I'm going to take Philadelphia. I just don't know if the Rams can stop that rushing attack. And I don't know, and I worry about that often. The Rams are one of those teams. They could score 40, and it wouldn't surprise me, or they could score 10. It wouldn't surprise. You never know what you're getting. I'm always a little nervous when I take 4 favorites to win, because you're like, one of them's just not gonna. If I had to look, the Ravens and Bills, that's a game to me. Listen, it's a coin flip. I mean, it really is. That I'm taking the Ravens. I just think their overall roster's better, and I think defensively they're better. So like, I'll go that way. But I'll tell you what, man. Whoever loses that game, that's gonna be a long off season.
Mm-hmm.
I mean. I wrote a column coming out tomorrow about it, or Friday for those listening. Whatever quarterback loses that game, you're going to, fair or unfair, you're going to have the conversation of, is this guy ever going to win a Super Bowl? Is it ever going to happen? And look, I think if the Chiefs were to advance, whoever wins this Buffalo-Baltimore game, if you lose at Arrowhead, it's frustrating, it's upsetting. But nobody's going to sit there who's serious and be like, oh, that guy's a fraud. Okay, it's like losing at Foxborough for the last 20 years. Like, okay, I mean, what are you going to do? But if you lose this game, not that there's any shame in losing to the other team or the other guy, but it's like, man, you couldn't even get to the game, and that's going to be a hard one. That's going to be a hard one for whatever quarterback loses, man, especially if they don't play well. Look at Herbert right now. I mean, everybody and their mother's looking at Herbert right now going, yeah, listen, you're talented and stuff, but, you threw 4 interceptions in a playoff game. Can I take you seriously? Fair or not, it's going to take Herbert 12 months to erase that, right? Nothing he does in the regular season is going to matter. Herbert's at that point now. Lamar and Josh Allen are well at that point. I don't care if you win the MVP. Win these games. That's what matters. And if Allen loses this game, that's a 3rd year in a row you lost in this round at home to one of your contemporaries. It will have been Burrow, Mahomes, Lamar, 3 years in a row. That hurts. So it's going to be very interesting. But I'll take Baltimore, I'll take Kansas City, and I'll take Detroit and Philly. And I look forward to sitting here next week and being like, well, I'm a dope because one of those games or 2 of those games, whatever, didn't play out that way. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching and or listening to the show. For Gilberto Manzano, I am Matt Verderame. Enjoy the divisional round. We will be back next week to preview Championship Sunday. Take care.